As fall quickly slipped into winter, I found myself with less and less time to prepare for the winter holidays. But that's how it usually is with work this time of year, no? A mad rush before everyone flees their office. Not unlike these multicolored swans. In continuation of Deloitte's newsletter series called Every Other Friday, I'm working on 2 more illustrations today. This particular illustration is centered around the concept of leadership. One of the things I've really enjoyed about working with Deloitte thus far is that they've allowed me to diverge a bit from my own norm, indulging a more fantastical route and a bit less of a literal way of representing the concepts introduced in the newsletter. Here were the initial sketches, one being a campaign on horses being led by a figure toward a distant castle, another being a traveling circus led by its ringleader to a new city. But the client happened to choose my favorite sketch, a flock of swans, with one being the first to take to the water. Do swans come in colors other than black and white? Probably not, but we have no limitations other than our own imagination here. This time around, I wanted to challenge myself with a color scheme I don't normally use. I was mostly going for warm shadows and cool highlights, but in general, I tried going for highlights with contrasting hues to their underlying base colors. Probably the trickiest thing about working on this piece was drawing all these wings. Normally, I'd draw them in a more stylized fashion, taking liberties with wing anatomy and fudging as I see fit. But this time I decided to take a slightly more realistic approach to echo some of the detailing on the distant architecture in the background. By the way, if you'd like to hear about more behind-the-scenes development, consider subscribing over at Patreon. Technically, I started posting there back in August as a place where my sketches and thoughts could dwell, so I guess I'm soft launching it here now, huh? It serves as a home for sketchbooks, concepts, process, thoughts around work, behind the scenes, and random things I'm currently into. If any of that sounds interesting to you, quite a few entries are free for perusal. The rest of the work I created for Deloitte can also be found there, as well as more in-depth process stock. That's all at patreon.com/KESalt. That said, let's get back to these swans. In the background, I'm streaming a playthrough of Elden Ring simply because I'm addicted, but I don't have enough time to play it. It's truly pathetic, but I need to get my fix somehow. My character is currently stranded on the mountaintop of giants. I've got to save her, but there's too much work to finish at the moment. The bright side of this fixation is that it does have an influence on my art. I've been a bit more willing to include architectural elements, as well as more fantasy trappings. And here's how the leadership piece turned out. Now here is the true freelancer working from home uniform. In addition to the leadership piece, I'll also be working on a piece about inclusive growth. Here are the sketches I came up with for the client, and again they picked my favorite one. The intention was to depict plants of various shapes and sizes, emphasizing how as a collective they create a sanctuary-type potted garden. As you can see, I've reverted back to my favorite green and pink, but hopefully these garden crocs make up for it. What else have I been into lately? I recently watched the first season of The Terror. It's one that Netflix kept sprinkling on my homepage, but the thumbnail and premise never quite piqued my interest. Until now, that is. I heard it mentioned on a YouTube video essay breaking down the elements of horror, and The Terror was one the essayist sung praises of. While historical fiction, based on a true event, is a genre I don't normally turn to, the series Chernobyl somehow broke the seal on that stance of mine. And the terror has quite a bit in common with Chernobyl, one being Jared Harris, who I've unexpectedly become a stan of. The premise of The Terror is a fictionalized account of the lost expedition of the Royal Navies in search of the Northwest Passage in the Arctic. But in this horror retelling, they are also terrorized by a supernatural force. I typically enjoy horror stories that start with a bad situation and then little mysterious happenings pile on bit by bit to make it worse, before it all ultimately unravels. This one has the added satisfaction of layered character dynamics and dynamic character arcs. It's a dark series, but it has some genuinely beautiful human moments. And I will forever be changed by that communion monologue. Anyway, here's how the inclusive growth piece turned out. Let us take this brief interlude to visit Sammy and oversee her cold bathroom breaks. While I don't appreciate being cold, I do love the long shadows cast over winter afternoons, and the way fireplace scents carry on the thin air. Who's this? Why, it's Isla, and she's ready for a holiday movie marathon with the girlies. She even prepared this lovely charcuterie board for us. California, Mexican. Thanks for hosting, Isla. In preparation for the Year of the Snake, let's work on yet another cat drawing. Much smaller than my last derpy piece, we'll be working at 10 by 14 inches rather than 19 by 24 inches. So you can breathe a sigh of relief for my poor wrists. For now, at least. One thing I sometimes do while filming is to forget to check that my dang head is not in the way of the camera. And unfortunately, I got carried away drawing and forgot to do that here. So although I technically filmed the part where I created all these outlines, my head was in the way. You'd think I'd learn, right? But no. There really is something satisfying about drawing cats as slightly amorphous blobs, don't you think? Once again, I'm returning to my baser instincts and coloring with lots of chartreuse. I told you, I have a sickness. With 2024 wrapped up, I can look back on it and say I was pretty fortunate with work that year. It was a bit of a sigh of relief because 2023 was financially the lowest earning year I've had since starting out as an illustrator 9 years ago. Although I technically had more work in 2023 than 2024, the budgets for those jobs were much lower. I also felt so much cognitive dissonance in 2023. There I was dipping into my savings despite working full-time, while in the same year being asked to judge for Society of Illustrators. I mean, I've always felt imposter syndrome in some capacity, no matter what stage of my career in illustration, but this just heightened it. Couple that with the overall detachment that results from the commodification of your work, and art making can feel very disorienting. What am I saying with all this? Just that sometimes it's easy to forget how resilient we must be. As a freelancer, it sometimes seems as though you can never fully relax. But hey, that's life for most of us under late-stage capitalism, am I right? Here I am, once again, talking about our old friends, Burnout and Imposter Syndrome. So when 2024 rolled around with better budget jobs and more deliverables, I took on as many as I could juggle. I still had that hungry mindset born out of the shortfalls of the previous year. This eagerness, in combination with luck, left me with a financially fruitful year. But also due to that hungry mindset from the previous year, I pushed myself harder than I normally would have. I ended up working a lot of late nights and weekends and pulled at least 2 all-nighters. Maybe this just exemplifies poor personal boundaries, but as I get older, I've slowly come to the conclusion that maybe burnout isn't an individual's moral failing, but rather a systemic failing. A feature rather than a bug. It starts when you have a lull in work or a lack of healthy budget work. Then your bank account gets hungry, so when presented with better opportunities, you take as many as you can and get overwhelmed to the point where you can't work at the same level you were maintaining before. So you take on less work. Then your bank account gets hungry again. Thus the cycle of burnout. When you're constantly treading water, hoping to catch the next wave of work that comes in, it's a lot easier to slip under and lose your breath. Even if you manage to get ahead, it never quite feels like you're ahead. And maybe that's where the imposter syndrome ties in. All that to say, I still don't really know what the answer is. Did any of that even make sense? But if you identified with any of it, at least we can say we're not alone. Also, if you've never read it, Burnout by Amelia and Emily Nagoski is a great read on the topic. On a brighter note, 2024 fully rekindled my love for comics. Although it's an industry with its own very big burnout problem, I get so much joy out of reading and studying and drawing comics. With that in mind, I'd just really like to make more and more comics in 2025, however possible. It's scary being so enamored with the medium you have so little experience with. Every time I make comics, I feel clumsy and embarrassed about myself. But I think that's part of what excites me about it. While it's probably best for me to practice on smaller one-shots and work my way up from there, I'd love to work on longer narratives one day. Just putting that out there into the universe. And if you're a comics creator yourself, I have so much love and appreciation for you. It's truly a labor of love, and it takes so much hard work and diligence to keep creating those panels. Is there anything you're looking forward to yourself in 2025? Any baggage you're carrying over from last year? Either way, know that I'm truly grateful for you being here. Thanks so much for sticking around. Happy New Year and see you next time.